What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, a podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Jennifer Gerlach. Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Jennifer. I'm a psychotherapist in St. Louis. Wrote a book called The Recovery or the Psychosis and Mental Health Recovery Workbook, and enjoy helping people.
Nice. So I found you, as I do with most of my guests, on psychologytoday.com. And in that, on there, I found an article or a blog that you wrote about surviving, I think it was called, Major Depressive Episode.
Yeah.
So I always like to define things. So let's start with that. What is a major depressive episode?
Sure. So you can think of three types of depression. Over here we have regular sadness, which we all go through here and there. You moving forward a little bit, we have heartbreak. Something happens that really messes with you, like a situational depression. And that can be pretty bad. And then on the far side, we have a major depressive disorder where it's the most severe type of depression, a clinical type of depression. And with that, usually we'll find that we're not enjoying things as much as we used to. It might be hard to take care of yourself. It might be more difficult to sleep, more difficult to eat. And it really impacts every aspect of your life at that point.
And a depressive episode, is that, could that be experienced in all, like all of those, each one of those three, or is that only in a major depressive disorder, or?
Yeah, usually a major depressive disorder. With a situational depression, a heartbreak, sure, that can be episodic, but the major depression, really, we're looking at a clinical level of depression.
And is there anything, I know you sort of mentioned it, where you can't, sort of I'm paraphrasing here, but you can't really get excited about anything, is there where a sadness and or a situational depressive can turn into, and if so, what are you looking for as a clinician to diagnose someone with something that's a major depressive episode?
Yeah, so a situational depression can certainly have a lot of those features. With a major depression, we're looking at once the situation changes, you're still feeling down, or the depression is getting to a point where it's affecting your quality of life and it's affecting your ability to handle the situation that's causing you to feel so down. With a major depression disorder, typically there's some genetic component, not always, but it's a little more severe and a little bit more long lasting than a situational depression.
Yeah, you say long lasting, so we're looking at, like, if it's 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, like what's the sort of guideline?
Yeah, the tricky thing about a major depressive episode is it can be anywhere from 2 weeks to several years. The 2 weeks is the minimum for the diagnosis.
Okay.
But some, folks will have it for a few months. Some folks will have it for a few years. Some folks will have it almost for a lifetime. But even if you have a consistent major depressive episode, you can still recover. You can still have a good quality of life. It just can take a lot.
Yeah, well, and that's what we're going to dive into, sort of the steps that you can take when you are having this, a major depressive episode. And you cover, I think it's 9 of them. And so
Okay.
let's dive into those. So step one is, and I've scribbled this stuff and probably paraphrased.
Sure.
So if it's not exact, please correct me. The first point was, know that it will not always be this way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you're in the thick of it, that's really hard to sort of wrap your head around, but that is true, right? You can, there is another side of this shitty, I'll call it, tunnel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're in the thick of a major depressive episode, it can feel like you're going to feel like this forever. And that's one of the tricks depression uses, because when it feels like you're going to feel like this forever, it can feel very hopeless. But that lowest point, that's as low as you can get. And once you get to that lowest point, it's only up from there. And so keeping in mind that this is not have to be how it will be forever, that can help you get through.
Yeah, and that's it. Like you said, it is tough when you're in the thick of it, but it is true. So I'm hopeful that, the reason I wanted to do this episode is because, for many reasons, but maybe some selfish ones too. But if someone is listening to this podcast and maybe they're having a good day, a good week, a good month, a good year, but suddenly things take a turn for the worse, or if they're starting out, they can come to this episode and listen to this and get these things and tools and steps to help them get through this. And obviously, the first one is to know that it's gonna be okay. It's not gonna be like this forever. So it's an
Absolutely.
excellent point. So the second one is one that I sort of champion all the time, and that is ask for help. And I want to get a little bit specific, but let's just cover that. Ask for help. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's two types of help. First type of help you get from your support system, your friends, maybe a pastor or an old mentor, and that's extremely important. The second type is sometimes we need clinical help. Sometimes we need to talk with a therapist or a doctor if it gets to a certain level, or if, say we've had major depressive episodes in the past and something has helped, there's no shame in reaching out for that.
Yeah, and some of that help, I think it's important to find a professional for sure. I think support groups like the one I run on Facebook is important too. People that are in it with you. The group I run is for divorced men, so there is strength in numbers in a way. There is some comfort in not feeling alone. But one of the also important aspects, as you said, is clinical help, and we're talk about that a little bit. And it sort of bleeds into this next point, which is keep asking. I think it's really important that, and you kind of mentioned this in the blog about finding the right therapist. It's just because someone is a therapist doesn't mean they're the right therapist, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So sometimes we try to check in with somebody, the therapist could be a really nice person and you might have a really great conversation with them, but if you don't feel a strong connection or if they don't have the tools to help you with a particular issue, they might not be the right fit. And I think that most of us therapists are well aware of that. And so when somebody's like, hey, like, I don't know if this is working out, we don't take offense to that. We'll help you find someone that you do click with because ultimately we want you to get better. We want you guys to thrive.
Yeah. And so that's something you've had to deal with then. You've had someone come to you, or maybe have you ever pointed it out and say, I'm not sure I'm the right fit?
Yeah, absolutely. Both. What I do, and a lot of therapists actually offer this, is I'll do a consultation before I see a client. And that first consultation will tell us a lot about whether we're a good fit, but sometimes we don't realize right away. And if it's not a good fit after a month, hey, that's cool. We'll help you find someone else, and hopefully it's not time lost. Usually someone will gain something from that time. But, I think that we all have the capacity to relate to different people to different levels. And fortunately, there's a variety of different therapy approaches and, therapist personalities that people relate to.
Is that something that's taught in therapy school or college or whatever when you're going to be a therapist? Like, is that something I would think that keeping your own mental health in check has got to be it's an important part of life. It's got to be a huge part of being a therapist. Is that something that's covered when you went to school?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So our professors talk to us a lot about self-care. They talk to us a lot about you can only take people where you've been. So a lot of therapists, they might not tell you their whole story. And, that's because it's about you. They're not going to dive into their own divorce or their own depression or whatever. But most therapists have done a lot of healing on their own. And most therapists are also seeing a therapist themselves, or they're doing some other work on themselves. They're doing journaling, they're exercising, they're taking time to reflect and meditate and to build themselves so that they can be the best for the people they help.
Yeah, sorry again, like I said before we jumped on, rabbit holes appear because I
Yeah.
have the attention span of a rabid dog. So the other, like I said, it's keep asking, right? Sometimes especially when you're depressed, you can go to a therapist and you don't feel like it's the one, or it doesn't work out or whatever, and then you can get depressed and be like, oh, it's it's nothing, nobody out there. It's just, and you just got to keep that mentality of I'm going to find the right one, right? And it's not always easy to have that mindset, but it's really important, I think, in life in general. If there's something you really want, sometimes I think, as Randy Pausch said, brick walls occur, and you got to find a way around them or through them. And I think therapy is just like dating. You can't settle. You got to get one that's right for you.
Yeah. I could think of 5 different excellent therapists in the area, and it might be 5 very different sessions that they offer. So it's a very individualized type thing, 5 very different approaches, 5 very different personalities. The offices are going to look different and
Yeah.
Those little things might make a difference. Sometimes it might be that the therapist has a dog in the office, or you guys can relate over something small, or it might be the therapy approach, the type of therapy the therapy is using.
Yeah, we're gonna get into some of that a little bit because you mentioned some. I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole yet, but I'm curious all the different modalities and like that stuff fascinates me. But the next point was seek meaning. Let's really what do you mean by that? I mean, I know what you mean, but let's expound on that. What does that mean? What does seek meaning mean?
Yeah. So it's very difficult to deal with suffering when it feels like it's pointless.
Hmm.
Seeking meaning can be finding meaning in your suffering or finding meaning in the small things. It might mean just going outside and looking at a multicolor leaf and, taking in the beauty of that, or having a conversation with somebody you're close to and enjoying that. I know when we're feeling depressed, a lot of times things don't feel meaningful and we tend to withdraw. And to get through a depressive episode, we want to try to do the exact opposite of that. So even if it doesn't feel like it would be meaningful, doing it anyway, trying it anyway, saying that this matters to me, so I'm going to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, I that's a tough one, I think, especially when you're going through a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lose, oh, obviously you'll lose some time with your children no matter what. But I think it's important to look at what meant something to you before the divorce. And I know obviously people say, well, my marriage, well, that you can't look at that because that's no longer there. But um, perhaps it's the connection you had, and you want to find that again, right? There was meaning in that connection, and I do believe that. I'm not really. I don't have the belief that there's one person for everyone. I just think that's nonsense. I think people are compatible in different ways, but I think that you can have a connection with another person the same that you had with your ex-wife. I really do believe that. I know it takes time and effort and energy and all that kind of good stuff, but I think you can even, because if you go through this process and you really examine yourself and what went wrong and what you did wrong and the compatibility issues maybe that were there, you can then find someone who just kind of fits you better. And especially if you know yourself better, then you kind of know what you're looking for or what would work with you. But I think that it can be important to try and find the meaning that isn't too far from the meanings that were before. So if it was your kids and you're seeing them half the time, you could focus on the fact that, I only see them half the time or whatever it is. Or you could focus on, I'm going to enhance and hone in on that relationship as best as I can to find the meaning there. But it can be really, really difficult to find hope, right? I think that's meaning is sort of similar in a way, right? Find that
Yeah.
hope when you're going through something like this, but it is important for sure. The next point is look for little good things. And Dr. MC McDonald, I don't know if you're familiar with her. She wrote a book called Unbroken. She talks about tiny little joys, and I think this is kind of what you're talking about. It's these small things. And again, and you mentioned it earlier, like the color of a leaf. It is hard to find these things, but they are there. It is important to try and find the littlest things when everything seems, in general, in your life seems terrible. It is possible to find these little things. Can you kind of talk about like how you approach that, or what kind of framework or like thought process you use for that sort of practice?
Yeah. So this is literally the very smallest of things. It can be standing on your porch during a storm and just feeling what that storm is like if you enjoy storms. If you don't, that might not be for you.
Right.
It might be taking a drink of coffee and just enjoying that, just saying, hey, I'm having this coffee right now, and that's all I need to focus on right now. It could be bigger things too, but we want to start with the small things because when we're feeling depressed, a lot of times that capacity to enjoy things gets a little muted. And it's almost like practicing and building that habit back up and saying, hey, I can still enjoy things, even for 5 seconds of drinking this coffee, or even for, 10 minutes of watching the storm. I can still be here and enjoy life.
Yeah, it's really tough, but it is possible, and I think it certainly is necessary. When
Mhm.
everything seems bleak, you really, it is about, I say this all the time, it's about intention. Like I don't want to be like this. I think some of us sometimes, I see this a lot, where guys sort of, they get mired in this muck and depression, and here's a bit of a rabbit hole. How much of getting out of depression is intent and effort? Like, isn't that a huge part? I mean, I think that's anything in life, right? If you want to stay depressed, if you want to stay feeling like a victim in some ways, you're then you're going to stay there, right? You have to make the intent. You have to, and I know that's hard, but like, it's not going to change otherwise, right?
Yeah, I think that having that intent and will to come through depression is absolutely essential. That hope is essential. It's not always enough, but it's important to take the first step. And sometimes that does mean getting extra help. It does mean reaching out to a therapist or a doctor, or, reaching out to your support network again, or, switching up your circumstances. And it might not be just you, but it has to be you initiating those steps. And it has to be you having the hope and will to say, hey, I want to get better. And I'm going to do everything I can to get better. And it might be really difficult right now to do those things, but I believe that it will pay off.
Well, and we talk about hope, and that's the other point you talk about. Look for success stories. I think this is if I had to boil it down to one reason why I started this podcast, is to give hope, to give success stories, and it's littered throughout these 123 or 4 episodes. Like, it's there, you can see it. I think that's if I had to boil it down to one of these points, I think is maybe the most important is that one. Because if you can, my theory is, if you can see that someone else did it, even one person one time, then that means it can be done, because we're all human, right? There's no one, certain people have certain skills and whatnot. And I'm not talking about running a marathon here. I'm talking about getting out of depression, surviving a divorce. It is possible, right? I mean, we see it.
Absolutely. And I think that it can be helpful. We have so much at our fingertips these days with the internet, both for good and bad. But, I think it can be helpful sometimes to hear stories from other people who've gotten through depression. It can also be helpful to think about people close in your life who maybe have overcome things themselves. Most people have been through something, and considering what helps them get through that, considering that it probably wasn't an easy time for them at first, but they did get through it, and taking a little bit of their hope and using that to light up your world, that can mean a lot.
Yeah, I think it's so very important. Another important part, another thing that I like to stress is your next point, which is refuse to isolate.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one for men, especially for men.
Mm-hmm.
How important is that in sort of a depressive recovery process? How important is it to get around other folks?
It's extremely important. Depression thrives on isolation. In fact, a lot of mental health disorders, even like schizophrenia, with isolation and loneliness, will deteriorate, but depression is especially sensitive to that. So you're right. Like, it makes sense after divorce, or when you're feeling depressed, and especially if you're dealing with both, you might not want to be around people at all. You might think, I'm not going to be good company now. They're not going to be around me anyway. I'm not going to enjoy myself. Why would I be around anybody? And it can be very tempting to isolate. And it's so important not to, because if you do isolate, the depression just gets worse. And those thoughts just kind of tend to confirm themselves. And you can feel more like, oh, I'm bad company. I shouldn't be around people. And it's just a spiral downward. But sometimes unisolating yourself is difficult. Sometimes it's just going to a coffee shop and being around people and not engaging with people at first, or it's just having a 5-minute conversation with somebody on the phone, or, maybe even like an internet support group, things like that. It doesn't have to be, a 3-hour day with your friend at the amusement park or something like that.
Yeah. I think, again, it's one of those things that, yes, it can be difficult, especially for men. But if you want to survive this, I shouldn't say that. If you want to recover, maybe it's the right word, or move past, I'm not sure. Then you got to do some of these things, and not isolating is one of the bigger ones. The last one, I think, it ties into a lot of these, is remember your reasons for life. And so I think this kind of ties into, searching for meaning and those kind of things. And I think, if I know there's a particular gentleman, he's popping in my head. He went through a divorce, and then he lost his mother not too long ago. And I think about, and he was very close with her, took care of her at the end of her life. And I think about this gentleman, and I think about how maybe he could see it as his reason for living is gone, right? His marriage is gone. I'm not sure about I don't think he had children. I could be wrong on that. But then his mom passed away, he was very close with. And I think you could look at that and be like, I don't have a reason to live. But I think, well, I was thinking about this because I lost my father when I was 22. So I know the pain of that. And I was very close to my father. He was my biggest supporter. I wouldn't be in life where I am if it wasn't for him. And so I think about not the fact that he's gone, and that does suck a lot sometimes, especially when you're going through something and your biggest supporter isn't there. But then I think about, what would he want me to do? Would he want me to give up? Would he want me to cash it in? I don't think so. And so I think, again, we talk about looking for, searching for meaning, searching for the reasons, searching for tiny little joys, or the little things. And I think if you search hard enough, regardless of the situation, you can find something.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the reasons for living change.
Mm.
You know, if your kids aren't in your life now, they might still very well care if you're going to be on this planet in 5 years. You know, when they may want to be in your life or may have that opportunity to. Sometimes we find meaning in hoping that in time we will find a meaning. So it might not be like, okay, today feels meaningless, but tomorrow might not. And I'm going to take steps to move towards something that I want, to rebuild the life that I want. Sometimes we take meaning and, like you were describing, people who have been close to us, who've given us messages, and we carry that on. There's a rainbow of different meanings people can find. And, if you lose one, it hurts deeply. It's incredibly difficult. I never want to underestimate that.
Sure.
And there can still be other meanings and hopes for the future.
Yeah, I think there's a danger with like self-help and positive psychology and stuff where it sort of minimizes the hurt and the pain. And I'd never try to do that. I'm not
Yeah.
and I don't want to sound flippant and like, well, you just got to set the intention. I know how fucking hard it is. It's really, really hard. But what are your alternatives, right? Stay
Yes.
where you're at. I don't have any interest in that. I just don't. I don't want to be miserable and lonely and scared and hurt and angry and all the negative things the rest of my life. I just don't,
Sure.
because not only, when we're talking in the context of divorce, not only does it mean that, she did what she did, and not that I didn't have fault in it, clearly I did, but she also then continues to screw up my life in a way, right? Because I let her and her words and her actions and her, lifestyle dictate mine. And I just don't have any interest in that. It's, and so I understand it. It's not, none of this is easy. As I say all the time, I don't do episodes on brushing your teeth because that's a pretty simple thing, right? We got that one covered. I know how to brush my teeth. This is hard stuff, but it's not impossible. And so, we talked earlier about therapy and the importance of it, finding a good one. One of the things you mentioned in your blog post was acceptance commitment therapy. I don't know what that is, but it sounds cool. What is that?
Yeah. So acceptance commitment therapy is a more modern type of CBT. It involves really clarifying what is meaningful to you and moving toward that. Other parts of acceptance commitment therapy are, considering how you define yourself and the person behind your eyes. So a lot of times we have these labels we attach to ourselves, but those labels aren't us. We're the human behind our eyes. And that's a difficult thing to wrap your mind around, but it can be really helpful when we have some of those labels changed. Part of it is also changing your relationship to thoughts. So when we're feeling down, a lot of times negative thoughts are pretty automatic, and it's kind of difficult to just positive think yourself out of something or to make the negative thoughts go away. But how you react to the negative thoughts. So do you act on them, or are you able to say, hey, here's an old story that's coming up. My friends don't want to be around me. I've told myself this story over and over for years, and I'm going to notice it comes up and I'm not going to act on it because it's not going to help me out anyway. It's not going to move me toward the life I want to live.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. I've never
Yeah.
heard of it. Is this fairly new?
It's been around for a few decades,
Okay.
but more recently, more people are getting trained in it. And I would say in most areas, there should be some therapists who are trained in acceptance commitment therapy. It's pretty common, but it's not as common as like cognitive behavioral therapy or person-centered therapy.
Yeah. So it's would you say it's sort of adjacent to just regular psychotherapy? It's very similar.
Yeah, it's a type of psychotherapy. So you can think about psychotherapy as this big umbrella. We usually just call it therapy, but really there's many different types and many different ways of going about it. And acceptance commitment therapy is one particular variety of that.
What do you typically, if you don't mind, what do you typically practice, and have you dealt with a divorced client, and how did you help them?
Sure. So I do a whole bunch of types of therapies. I like acceptance commitment therapy, compassion focused therapy. I do a little bit of a type of therapy called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which involves rapid eye movements to help us process traumatic events, kind of mimicking REM sleep. It was really cool.
Yeah, if I understand that correctly, it takes your traumatic memory and brings it to the present, so you can sort of address it and deal with it. Is that how it works?
Exactly, exactly. Bringing it to the present and then helping you work through the areas that you've gotten stuck
Hmm.
so that it's still there, but you've processed it, you've moved forward. And maybe that event had changed how you saw yourself. And now you see yourself in a more healthy way again, or how you see the world in a more healthy way again.
Yeah, it's about again, Dr. Anthony McDonald talks about this, about sort of taking these things and putting them in the correct files. Like a lot of times, traumatic stuff, especially, you don't know where to file that because it's traumatic. It's not the happy folder file. It's not the I don't know, accident or whatever. It's, you don't really understand it. So or you know where to put it. Your brain doesn't know where to put it. So I think this stuff sort of allows you to process it so you can put it somewhere, so you don't have to continuously let it bounce around your brain. Is that sort of a good layman's term of how to deal with sort of trauma?
That's excellent. That's perfect description of EMDR and sorting through trauma. It's complex and we can also simplify it.
Yeah. Yeah. So and so have you had a divorced patient, that someone that came to you because they're going through a divorce?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's
It's
everywhere.
so common these days, and sometimes it's the parents, sometimes it's the kids,
Mm.
sometimes it's a whole family, and I can tell it's an incredibly painful thing for everybody involved. Typically, every
Yeah,
story is a little bit different.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there one? I mean, I guess because every story is a little bit different. There like if someone comes in, just an individual, um, and they're going through situational depression because of divorce, is there a, I guess it probably depends on the person, but is there a like a go-to modality that, like, I'm going to do this one with this person or because of this, or is it, do you determine that based on your consultation, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Honestly, it depends on the person in front of me and where they are. But regardless, I think the first part is just listening to them and giving them a space to tell their story. Because with the divorce, there's usually many, many events. It's not just one event. It's not like somebody just got robbed in a parking lot. There was everything in the marriage that led up to the divorce. That sometimes there's the aspect of introducing the divorce. So maybe they were served papers or served a protective order or something significant. Then there's the court system. Then sometimes there's a custody battle, and it can be a lot. It can be a lot. And I think just having a space to tell that story and to be heard is the first step in psychotherapy. And then we can go from there. If they need EMDR, we can do that. If they need acceptance commitment therapy, we can do that. But, first and foremost, it's a human in front of you, and you just want to hear them out.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, you know, how difficult sometimes it must be to because I see I have a, like I said, a Facebook group. There's 7,000 men. I see the pain and the suffering,
Mhm.
and it's, I know it's very difficult. Is that, again, this is sort of a little bit of a rabbit hole and a little bit personal, but is how difficult is that as a therapist at times to like deal with other people's issues? Like it must weigh sometimes.
Yeah. We are humans and I care about people, so when I see somebody and they're hurting, it affects me, especially when I see teenagers or kids hurting.
Mm.
I love kids, and what I found is, I have my own rituals. Somebody leaves, a lot of times I'll think to myself, may they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be peaceful, may they be safe. And that's one way of sort of letting go. But I think every therapist finds their own strategies of, coping. Some therapists swim, some therapists, rage in the vehicle with the heavy metal music off. Everybody's got their own thing. And I think that's very much encouraged. I know a lot of therapists love art, will do their own either visual art or musical art, but we all have ways of coping because we are, we're compassionate people typically. And we care about you guys. We do think about you guys between sessions. We might not call you up and be like, "Hey, dude, how's it going?" That would be inappropriate.
Right,
But
right.
we think about you guys, and we have our different ways of dealing.
Does it ever feel limiting because you can't do things like that? Like, hey, how are you? Just checking in.
I found that within reason, I can typically meld things so I can do what I need to do as long as I'm within my code of ethics. So, say there is somebody I'm meeting with, and it's not to a point where I'm going to try to get them in a hospital or something, but I know they're going through a really hard time. Maybe I know that, say, Wednesday is a significant day for them. They're not going to be able to come in for a session on Wednesday, but Wednesday is a significant day for them. I can say, hey, can I call you at like 8 p.m., after my clients, after you're finished with your day, can we check in for like 15 minutes? And if they say yes, that's perfectly fine,
That's
and we do that. But yeah, I think that there are certain limitations to the therapist role. I couldn't usually invite, I couldn't obviously invite a client to dinner or,
right.
things of that nature. But, at the same time, I think that that's good because if my therapist invited me to dinner, I don't know how comfortable I'd be talking to them as a
Right.
as a therapist anymore. They'd be a friend, so we do have to have some boundaries.
Is there again, this is definitely rabbit holes, but I love this stuff because I feel like I miss my calling in life. But is there ever a time, I'm sure there is, where you're like, if where you want to be like, just do this, like just leave this person or whatever, like quit that job, but you can't, right? I mean, isn't there, I guess that's sort of a two-parter. Like, have you ever had that? And then you can't really do that, right?
Well, ishy. It's complicated. So with the types of therapies I do, I'm much more concerned with my clients' values and what they want to move toward than what
Hmm.
I think is a good idea. So
That's
in
yeah, but that must be so tricky.
yeah, in 90% of the cases, I'll just reflect it back of, hey, what kind of life do you want to live? Is this
Hmm.
moving you toward that? I might use trickier questions like, when you turn 100 and you have a birthday party and it's going to be somebody that's really close to you who you've lived your life to that point exactly as you wanted to live, and they say something about you, what would they say about you? And is this moving you towards that? Like things to that nature. But very rarely do we get to give instructions. I will sometimes ask for permission to give advice, and I'll say, hey, I have an
Hmm.
idea here, and I don't know if you want to hear my idea or not. It may be offensive to you, and if it is, I'll apologize. But would you like to hear what I have to say? And in that way, if the person says yes, then sometimes I will give a little advice here or there. But I'm very reticent to do that because ultimately I don't know all things and I don't know their situation to the degree that they know it or their life goals or their values. And so I might think, oh gosh, I would not want to work that job. I would
Right.
leave that job. That boss is just taking advantage of you. I might think that in my head. But I always know that at the end of the day, my knowledge is just based on what they tell me and it's limited. And there might
Hmm.
be a very good reason that they're staying at their job that I can't wrap my mind around yet.
Is it a part of it getting them to think what you think, like, but leading them to it? In a way, it sounds manipulative, but it's not what I mean. You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't it sort of
Yeah.
like you can see something that's very obvious, and you just want to get them to see that too, and then you sort of, but you can't just say it, right? So you have to lead them, right?
I think in most cases, we're still looking at what the client values, but there are times where I might think, hey, like your friends want you around, your depression's telling you they don't, but they do. And in those cases, I might ask, certain open-ended questions that could lead to a guided discovery of, yeah, your friends want you around.
Hmm.
There are exceptions, say I'm talking to a teenager and they're wanting to run away from home, or they're wanting to steal somebody's vehicle or something like
Right.
that. In those cases, yes, in those cases, yes, we're going to be talking about the
Yeah.
consequences of that action and the risk reduction. But most often, it's more questions, it's more guided discovery, considering what's valuable to the client, which may be different than what's valuable to me, and it may be different than the conclusion I would have come to if I was in their shoes.
True. So I'm going to ask you two more questions. One is, again, provide a little hope here. Have you had let's stick with the demographic. Have you had a male client going through a divorce that you were able to see come to the other side and be okay?
Yes, I've had several, because of my allegiance to their confidentiality, I can't
Yeah, of course.
tell their story. But I
Sure.
have seen people who have been at rock bottom and seen them come back up. It happens every day. It's a challenging thing. And I think every single one of them would have said, hey, I don't know if I'm going to get out of this. And they do. They do.
The last question I ask everyone is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just beginning his divorce journey?
Yeah. So if you're dealing with depression along with this, that makes sense because this is a heartbreaking type of thing. I don't know exactly the circumstances that led to your divorce. You might be feeling all kind of things. I don't know. But whatever you're feeling, it makes sense given your circumstances. And you will get through this. You can get through this. You know, there are supports out there, including professional supports if you need that.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, especially on a Sunday morning. I really
Gladly.
appreciate it. Yeah, how can people find you to get in touch if they're in your area? Are you taking clients? What's the best way to sort of to reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah. So the best way to reach out to me is at truestorycounseling.com. And I'm on the Illinois side of the St. Louis area. And I am taking new clients. So if someone's
Awesome.
interested, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Gladly.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.